Hi, I'm Chris from the Hypro Service Department. Today I'll be showing you the disassembly and reassembly of a 5330C-HRX twin piston pump. Some of the tools required to work on these would be a 9/16 socket, a flat blade screwdriver, a 3/16 Allen, a long bolt, a claw hammer, and it's also helpful to have a 1055-0005 roller for putting the packings in. Though it's not absolutely necessary, you can still repair it without it. And we've got some specialty tools listed in your owner's manual that are helpful, but if you don't have access to them, it's still possible to work on it without those. Let's get started. The 5300 series is available with a variety of seal materials and performance to suit your application needs. It's also available with a hollow shaft or a solid shaft. And there's identification stamped on the end of each of these pump shafts, so you can call our tech support line if you need to identify your pump model. If the pump is leaking, you'll have a visual indicator from this area back here, and if there is fluid leaking back here, you'll need to disassemble the pump and repair it with new seals. The first thing we'll do is remove the heads by taking out the 9/16 bolts. To remove the cup, which is underneath this cup spreader, you want to turn the keyway of the shaft facing straight up. Reason being is that when you take out this center bolt, this connecting rod is going to turn in there, and if the keyway is up, then it won't shear off that grease fitting. If you do break it off, you can just drill it out. Under the center bolt is a small seal washer. You want to replace that. Remove the cup spreader by gently prying it out with a screwdriver, being careful not to damage it. There's an O-ring seal inside of that, and this is your cup. If this cup is worn or melted or has deep vertical grooves in it, that would cause a leak in this area. Also, if you've got vertical scratches or pitting inside of this sleeve, that would also cause a leak. I'll show you a better look at that in a minute here. This bottom part under the cup can be taken out with a screwdriver. You want to try to get it out from the center and be careful not to scratch the inside of this sleeve. Under that is another O-ring, a seal ring, and there's a guide down in the bottom. You want to inspect all of those parts for wear or damage. Next thing, we can flip it over and take apart the other side. Before you take apart the other side, make sure you remember to turn that keyway back straight up so you don't break this fitting off. Both the top and bottom are the same as far as the seals and the part stack. Notice that the valves are actually opposite from the other side. We'll get into that a little later. If you have some difficulty getting this piece out, you can pull this grease fitting out, take this retaining ring off in front of the bearing, push the whole bearing and shaft assembly out first, and then you'll have better access to be able to get in there and get that out. It is possible to replace the seal kit without removing the shaft, but if you have a hard time getting that out, that's one way that you can do it. Another thing you can do to get this out, once the other side is out, you can actually turn the crankshaft back in a down position, and you've got a little bit of room underneath to be able to get in there and loosen it up. You just want to be very careful not to damage that graphite guide that sits down in there. Now we can remove the shaft and remove the sleeves. The grease fitting is a press fit into the cam bearing. So to remove that, take your claw hammer and just pull that straight out. You probably want to replace that when we reassemble it. And then on the other side is this retaining ring. You want to get behind this with a screwdriver, being careful not to damage this bearing, and you can twist that right out. Now we can go to the press and push out the shaft and bearings. When removing the shaft assembly, make sure that whatever you're pushing it out with is small enough to fit through the hole of that connecting rod. This is a good time to inspect the cam bearing for any damage. If the pump had been run while leaking for long enough, the chemical can actually get into the cam bearing and wash the grease out of it. If that cam bearing is shot, you'll need to replace the shaft and cam bearing assembly as one. Also check your main bearings and check that they don't feel lumpy and that they turn nice and smooth. From here, you can pull out that connecting rod and inspect these flat areas for any wear. That would be enough to feel with your thumbnail and replace as necessary. Next, we can actually push out the sleeves. To do that, you'll want to have something that will fit on top of that sleeve, but also be able to slip through that bore in the body. There's a special tool for that listed in the owner's manual if needed. Press that out and inspect the inside of this sleeve for any deep enough scratches to feel with your fingernail or any pitting. If the pump is sat with chemical in it for a long period of time, you may get pitting inside of this sleeve, and that will cause a leak even with a new seal. Check this O-ring. This is also in the repair kit. And make sure that this brass ring is in good condition. We'll push out the other sleeve. Inspect that sleeve for any vertical scratches or pitting and replace as necessary. Next, let's talk about the valves. If you've noticed a loss in pressure, it may be that your valves are starting to wear, or if there's an obstruction in one of the valves, that will also give you a loss of pressure. If you have broken valve springs, that will do it. If the poppets in here are stuck to the seats just from the chemical being pumped, that'll also give you a loss of pressure. One thing you can do is blow compressed air into the inlet port, and sometimes that can free up a stuck poppet. If you do need to remove the valves, these are some of those special tools that we talked about listed in the owner's manual. If you don't have access to this stuff, you can remove the parts with a needle nose and a screwdriver carefully. You want to make note of the orientation of the valves. On the inlet port, that valve will have the cage facing up. All four are the same. On the outlet port, you'll have the seat facing up. And then on the opposite end of the pump, you've got the inlet port, the cage facing up, the outlet port with the seat facing up. You want to make sure to put them back in that orientation. To remove this valve, pull that straight out, inspect it for a broken spring or any obstructions, and then on this side, use this tool to pull that out and inspect this valve as well. Same goes for the other side. You can pop the valve itself apart to clean out any obstructions, and also to inspect the seat for any wear or pitting. Inspect the poppet as well for any wear and replace as necessary. You want to check out all four of them. If the valve comes apart inside, you can take it out piece by piece. This is a good time to inspect the condition of the inside of the valve bore. You can run a wire brush through there to be able to see any chemical etching easier. Also inspect this area on top of this surface right here for chemical wear. If there's enough wear inside of this valve bore, the valve can actually move up and down while the pump is running, which will give you erratic pressure and start to wear the body out to a point where you can't use it anymore. Now we can go over the reassembly. The first thing we'll do is install a new set of valves available in a repair kit. And if you're reusing the old valves, if they look good, basically just put that O-ring on and then make sure this poppet faces this way so that step will fit into this spring. Make sure that's as straight as you can get it, and then snap it back together. And then you'll want to put a little bit of oil around the outside of that O-ring. And then remember that orientation. So on the outlet port, that valve will face with the seat up. On the inlet side, that valve will have the cage facing up. Flip the pump over, put some oil on your O-rings. Inlet port, cage faces up. Outlet port, the seat faces up. Now we can go back to the press and reinstall the shaft and bearing assembly. To reinstall the shaft, put it into the pump body with the cam bearing facing down. You'll want to have something to support this bearing. Make sure this is as straight as possible and don't force it, or you can bend these C-clips up. If you do happen to bend those, you'll want to replace them. You just press that straight down until it bottoms out. And then reinstall this retaining ring like so. And now we can put the sleeves back in and the packings. So these are the parts that are included in the repair kit, and one kit will repair the complete pump. Usually what I'll do is build up the part stack ahead of time, and then you can just drop them right into the pump. So the first thing you'll do is put some oil or grease inside of that sleeve. Drop your guide down in all the way. Next, the seal ring. You want to be careful not to crease this. Put a little oil on it and you can kind of work it in at an angle, and then use that roller to bottom it out. And then take this larger O-ring, put a little oil on that, and that will actually fit down inside of that seal ring. So take the roller and push it down into it. Drop this in facing this way, and then the small O-ring goes around the cup spreader. Put a little oil on that. You can snap that into the cup and then push that into the sleeve, and then your center bolt and that new sealing washer. Same goes for the second one. Put some grease in it. Put the guide in first. Seal ring, put some oil on that. Bottom that out with the roller. Take the larger O-ring. Put some oil on that. Bottom that out with the roller. Drop this in. Make sure everything's seated nice and straight. Take the smaller O-ring. Put that on the cup spreader. Put some oil on that. Put that into the cup. Push that into the sleeve. Center bolt. Seal washer, and leave these parts aside for now. We can go ahead and put these into the pump. Before you can put your part stack in, you want to reinstall the connecting rod. It helps to put a little grease on the surfaces of that. And then you notice this cam bearing, you'll have to kind of turn it and work it in, and then you want to have that keyway facing straight up again. Try to center this connecting rod as best you can. Take that part stack that we put together and drop that down in, making sure that the guide that's on the bottom isn't hung up on this connecting rod, and that it fit down flush. And then you want to torque that center bolt to 130 inch-pounds. Here's where you put that other O-ring from the kit down inside here. Helps to put a little oil on it as well. And then that brass ring, this can go on either way. Push that down in. You can put that side, you can put the head on for that side. I could just do that It's a good idea to tighten down those bolts in a crisscross pattern to make sure you're drawing down the head evenly. We'll flip over the pump. You want to turn that shaft again so that keyway is facing straight up. Take our other part stack. Carefully drop that in, making sure that it goes down all the way and that guide's fitting over top of the connecting rod. Torque that center bolt to 130 inch-pounds. Reinstall that skinny O-ring. And the final brass ring. Make sure that the O-rings on the heads are in good condition. Tighten that back down. And then the last thing to do would be to reinstall the new grease fitting. And to do that, basically you'll just want to line that up into the cam bearing and tap it in with a hammer gently until you feel it bottom out. And then to straighten this out, while the pump is running, you can take a screwdriver, put it in this notch, and gently touch the grease fitting while it's spinning until it's straightened out and true. And you'll want to grease this cam bearing every 50 hours of operation or once a month. And you want to be very careful not to over grease it, because you can actually blow out the inner seal that's inside of the cam bearing. And if you have excessive grease in this cavity, it'll build up heat. So be very careful with that. That's all there is to it. This has been the 5300 series pump. For any additional assistance, call us at 1-800-468-3428 or check us out online at hypropumps.com.